What if the thing that kept you from living fully this year wasn't a lack of time or money or luck, but a lack of direction? What if deep down you know that 2025 didn't really end? It will just repeat itself on another calendar with other promises, but with the same patterns. Starting a new year well isn't about having goals. It's about having soul. It's about stepping out of autopilot, looking inward with courage, and making a choice. Either you repeat or you awaken. Stoicism doesn't come to promise you a year without pain. It comes to remind you that power lies in how you respond to that pain. That your freedom begins when you stop asking permission to be who you are. In this video, you'll receive 11 keys. Not to control the world, but to position yourself within it with strength, clarity, and presence. With each lesson, a different axis of your life will be touched. The internal, the relational, the sensory, the spiritual. But pay attention. This isn't content to consume passively. It's a mirror, a calling, a silent pact with your own consciousness. Before we continue, I want you to write in the comments with intention and truth. Today I choose to become cause, not consequence. Because whoever writes that phrase isn't just commenting, they're driving a stake into the ground of their own destiny. Now let's begin. The first lesson is this: what you cultivate inside commands what grows outside. You can change your house, your profession, your country. You can swap the furniture, the haircut, even your friends. You can paint the walls white, clean out every drawer, reorganize every detail of your life. But if you don't change what you carry inside, everything will return to exactly how it was. The pain will find another way to manifest. The anguish will arrange a new face. The confusion will infiltrate again like water leaking through an invisible crack. There are those who think that starting over means doing things differently on the outside. But real new beginnings happen in the invisible, in the way you think, in what you believe yourself to be, in the type of emotion you feed even when no one is watching. Because what you cultivate within yourself commands what grows on the outside. You want to transform 2026? Then stop looking only at the goals, the numbers, the plans. Look at your internal soil, at the ground where all those goals will be planted. If that soil is infertile, dry, or contaminated by toxic thoughts, it doesn't matter what you try to plant. Everything will grow crooked, fragile, short-lived. But if you take care of the invisible, of what no one applauds, everything visible will gradually align. The human mind is like a garden, only invisible to the eyes. Every day you scatter seeds, a word you repeat mentally, a memory you insist on revisiting, a judgment you feed, a comparison you can't let go of. And so, without realizing it, you cultivate realities. What you water grows, even without wanting it to. If you keep saying you're not capable, that things never work out for you, that you're always behind, those words take root and wrap their branches around your present. Every time you allow a negative thought to repeat, you deepen the roots of a story that should have ended long ago. And the more you repeat it, the more it seems like truth. Until one day you stop questioning and start living as if that were your limit, when in reality it was just a poorly cultivated belief. This is why Stoicism doesn't talk about changing the world. It talks about changing yourself. The Stoics knew that the reality around us isn't just a neutral backdrop, it's a mirror. It reflects what we carry and returns to us every day, the contents of our consciousness. You wake up already feeling behind, pressured, as if time were your enemy. Maybe you're living according to a ruler that wasn't made for you. You feel envy, guilt, constant irritation. Maybe you're trying to fit into a life that wasn't built from what you truly desire, but from what you think you should want. There's a big difference between these two things, and you can only perceive this difference when you stop looking outward and start listening to the silence within. There's a type of loneliness that isn't an absence of people. It's an absence of inner truth. You're surrounded but empty. And this happens when you disconnect from what is yours, from what pulses in your essence. When you live on autopilot, comparing your life with others, seeking validation where there should only be presence. You don't need to be accepted to be complete. You need to be honest. You need to stop betraying yourself in the name of appearances, because every time you silence yourself to please others, you suffocate a part of yourself. Every time you force yourself to smile when you're crumbling inside, you widen the distance between who you are and who you show yourself to be. And that exacts a price, a high price. 2026 can be your year. But not because of a new planner or an online course. It can be your year because you finally decided to stop living as a stranger inside your own life. Stop and observe how you've been treating yourself. What kind of thoughts do you tolerate in your mind? Have you been your own support or your own saboteur? Because everything starts there, not on the first business day of the year, on the first thought of the morning, in how you get out of bed, in what you say to yourself when you make a mistake, in what you choose to silence, in what you accept as routine, even though you hate it. And here's a truth that might hurt, but also liberate. Your life is the way it is because you allowed it, sustained it, or silenced it. And if that's true, then your life can be different, because it depends on where you choose to place your consciousness. There's no point in wanting a new cycle while carrying old patterns. No point in changing the calendar if you insist on the same thoughts. The world only changes when you change what the world reflects. Your own presence. It's time to clean your internal garden. Cut what no longer flourishes. Throw away the rotten roots. Change the soil. Plant with intention. Nurture with patience. And above all, protect with firmness. Because everything you let grow inside you becomes the foundation of what you call life. And if what grows in you is anger, scarcity, fear, or guilt, what grows around you will be confusion, failure, pain, and repetition. But if what grows is calm, clarity, conviction, and truth, what flourishes outside will be lightness, focus, direction, and freedom. 2026 won't be a new year. It will just be a new reflection of what you decide to carry inside from now on. If this first lesson is already resonating with you, hit the like button. It tells me you're ready to look inward before looking outward. The second lesson goes deeper. Mastering the world is useless if you're a slave to yourself. Have you noticed how most people seek control? Control over their career, their routine, their image in others' eyes. Some try to control the future, relationships, even the opinions of strangers. They live at war with the unexpected, with imperfection, with everything that escapes the idealized plan. But there's a more important question than all of this. Do you have control over yourself? Because it's useless to conquer everything the world values if inside you're being commanded by impulses, reactions, addictions, and fears. True failure isn't losing control of what's outside. It's never having conquered what's inside. Stoicism doesn't talk about dominating the world. It talks about dominating yourself. And this is perhaps the most challenging and liberating task of existence, because the world can knock you down. But if you're master of yourself, no one can keep you on the ground. Now look honestly. How many times have you exploded inside over something small? How many times have you reacted on autopilot, later regretting words, decisions, or silences? How many times have you feared losing something that was never really yours? And more importantly, how many times did you know what was right but couldn't do it? That's where the human conflict lives. The mind knows, the body hesitates, the impulse wins. Being free isn't doing whatever you want. Being free is having dominion over yourself. It's being able to choose with clarity, even when the whole world screams for you to react. It's knowing how to say no to what seems urgent, but wounds your essence. It's acting with lucidity in the middle of chaos. The Stoic isn't cold. They're centered. They feel everything others feel, but they don't allow those emotions to decide for them. They hear the fear, but they walk. They recognize the anger, but they choose silence. They notice the pride, but they practice humility. Because they know that being commanded by emotions is like navigating a ship without a rudder. The current will take you, and it won't be where you want it to go. Most people live in flight from themselves. Distractions, addictions, packed schedules, social media. All of this functions as a sophisticated hiding place, but sooner or later, the inner truth demands presence. And when that happens, either you face yourself or you keep running until you get sick. Mastering yourself is having the courage to look directly at what you pretend doesn't exist. It's not letting yourself be deceived by your own arguments. It's getting up off the ground when your mind says, "Stay there, it's not worth trying again." It's when you silence all the voices that push you down and respond firmly, "Today I choose what I am, not what I feel," because you will feel fear. You will feel exhaustion, laziness, doubt, shame. All of this is natural. But what defines you isn't what you feel. It's what you do with what you feel. And you only begin to truly change when you realize you don't need to be motivated to act. That discipline is born when you understand your life is worth more than your mood of the day, that your mission is greater than your anxiety, that your calling is more sacred than your momentary hesitation. Mastering yourself isn't becoming a flawless machine. It's being a human with consciousness. It's feeling everything that needs to be felt, but choosing with lucidity. It's living with intensity without being dragged by childish impulses. It's building a firm, silent presence that doesn't need to impose itself because it simply sustains itself. Life won't be gentle all the time. People won't understand your choice of silence, of constancy, of balance. But that doesn't matter, because you're no longer trying to control what's outside. You're finally beginning to govern what's inside. And when that happens, everything changes. Fear loses its strength, anger loses its space, doubt loses its throne, because you understood the greatest territory you can conquer is your own being, and no one can take that except you yourself. Subscribe to this channel if you're finding value in this. We're building something here for people who want to live with intention, not just exist on autopilot. The third lesson is about noise. Avoid the noise. It dulls the soul. The modern world has a horror of silence, as if every second of quiet revealed something no one wants to face. So there's always background music, a video playing, a phone alert, some noise filling the void, and you get used to it. Like someone adapting to a polluted city. You think everything's fine, but gradually you lose your fine sense of smell, your delicate hearing, your ability to perceive nuances. When silence appears, it feels strange. It feels like absence. But what it actually is presence, the presence of what's inside, of what you stopped hearing because the noise outside became too constant. And the problem isn't just auditory. The problem is that this external noise dulls the internal world. Have you noticed how much harder it is to think clearly when you're constantly exposed to stimuli? Harder to feel deeply when something is always calling you, interrupting you, distracting you. You think you're informing yourself, but you're just fragmenting yourself. You believe you're relaxing, but you're just numbing your body with content that asks nothing of you except the next reaction. And so, the soul gradually dims, not for lack of strength, but for lack of space. The Stoics didn't live in silence by accident. They understood that only those who slow down internally can discern. That wisdom isn't born in noise, it forms in the interval. In the interval between stimulus and response, between impulse and decision, between emotion and gesture. But if you're constantly filled, you never access that space between things. You never allow thought to breathe. You never let emotion reveal its real contour. You never let truth appear, because truth requires silence, and everything that requires silence in this age is treated as irrelevant. There's a collective loss of depth. Conversations are shallow. Feelings are simplified into emojis. Pain is ridiculed or exposed in search of attention. There's no more time to digest. Everything needs to be immediate, instant, repostable. And in this, the soul, which is slow, patient, demanding, falls silent. It refuses to compete with stimuli. It withdraws, it waits, but it doesn't disappear. It gets sick, and this sickness of the soul appears in increasingly common forms. Chronic anxiety, fatigue without reason, lack of real pleasure, difficulty concentrating, emptiness after consuming what promised to fill. You might be wondering, but what do I do with this? I can't just leave the world, live in isolation. And the answer isn't in isolation. It's in discernment. It's in creating zones of silence within a noisy life. Moments when you close out the excess, when you choose the essential, when you withdraw from excess, not as escape, but as a form of regeneration. Because your mind needs pause, your body needs slowness, your soul needs air. And the world isn't going to offer you this. It will be your silent decision to preserve yourself. Start with small gestures. Don't take your phone to bed. Eat meals in silence. Walk without earphones. Sit for 5 minutes just to listen to your breathing. Turn off notifications that bring you nothing but anxiety. Don't see silence as punishment. See it as fertile ground. It's in silence that you'll hear new ideas, that you'll remember forgotten feelings, that you'll understand decisions that until yesterday seemed confusing. Silence returns you home. It reminds you of what's real. It forces you to feel. And feeling, even when uncomfortable, is always better than numbing yourself. Avoiding noise isn't about rejecting the world. It's about protecting your clarity. It's about not allowing your mind to become just a repository of others' voices. It's about not living in reaction to what reaches you, but choosing what crosses through you. And only those who hear what they think, what they feel, what they need, can choose with lucidity. And that only appears when the sound outside lowers its volume. When you close the doors to excess, and open a window inward. The soul wasn't made for rush. It flourishes in its own time. And if you want to start 2026 with lucidity, you'll need to protect that time. You'll need to say no to many things that seem harmless, but occupy the space of your inner listening. You'll need to accept the discomfort of being alone with yourself for a few minutes, because that's where clarity appears, not in others' voices, but in the echo of what you always knew and had forgotten to hear. Comment below with one noise you're going to eliminate from your life this week. Making that commitment public is the first step to following through. The fourth lesson is about discipline. Discipline doesn't suffocate, it liberates. The word discipline has gained a bad reputation. For many, it sounds like punishment, like a rigid structure that limits, that traps, that suppresses the spontaneous. And it's no wonder. For a long time, discipline was associated with imposition, blind obedience, soulless rules. But that's not the discipline that transforms. That's not the discipline of the Stoics. The discipline that liberates isn't the one imposed from outside in. It's the one born from inside out. It's the gesture of someone who doesn't want to live hostage to their own impulses, someone who understood that yielding to any desire at any time isn't freedom, it's loss of control. And where there's loss of control, there's no peace, there's dependence, anxiety, fragmentation. You think you're choosing when you do what you want whenever you want, but are you really, or are you just obeying the loudest want of the moment? Immediate desire isn't wise. It wants relief, not clarity. It wants pleasure, not purpose. And following that desire without any questioning is like handing a ship's helm to the first wind current. It seems like freedom, but it's just absence of direction. True freedom is the opposite of that. It's knowing where you're going and not getting distracted by every wave. It's resisting the impulse that takes you away from what you decided to be. And that requires discipline. Discipline isn't a burden. It's a silent vow you make with your own essence, a pact with your lucidity, It doesn't serve to make you harder, it serves to make you more whole, because when you live without structure, everything becomes an exception. Today you sleep late, tomorrow you skip the routine, then you forget what you promised yourself, and gradually you lose internal confidence, because discipline, more than results, delivers coherence. It's what allows you to look at yourself with respect. It's what sustains true self-esteem, the kind that doesn't depend on applause, but on alignment, on knowing you're becoming someone who can trust themselves. The Stoics didn't associate discipline with rigidity, but with inner freedom. A disciplined Stoic isn't someone insensitive, inflexible, mechanical. It's someone who doesn't let themselves be carried away by what's volatile. Someone who knows their life can't depend on the mood of the day, that their decisions can't be dragged by passing emotions, that their path can't change every time something challenges their will. Discipline for them was a form of self-care, a construction of internal stability in a world that changes all the time. And this stability isn't built with control over everything, but with dominion over oneself. Maybe you think you need motivation, but motivation is weak fuel. It comes and goes. It's volatile, emotional, cyclical. Discipline is not. It stays even when the body is tired, even when the mind wants to give up, even when everything around seems to suggest it's easier to postpone. Discipline is what remains when enthusiasm passes. It's what sustains commitment to what you know is important, even when you no longer feel like it. It's what separates those who have only intention from those who have transformation. And see, discipline isn't living at war with yourself. It isn't forcing yourself, oppressing yourself, violating yourself. It's adjusting the rhythm with consciousness. It's establishing limits with gentleness. It's knowing you are not your impulses, that you don't need to say yes to everything that calls you, that you can choose the discomfort of now to harvest the peace of later, the peace that comes from having done what was needed, even when it wasn't easy, even when no one was watching, even when everything inside you was asking for escape. Real freedom isn't born from the absence of rules. It's born when the rules aren't a prison, but a bridge, when they were chosen with consciousness in service of something greater. And that something greater is you, whole. Your lucidity, your purpose, your peace. You don't need to be a monk or live with rigid rules. You just need to assume a commitment to what makes you stronger, more present, more alive. And that commitment starts in small choices, in the schedule you respect, in the word you keep, in the gesture you repeat, not because it's easy, but because it's necessary. Discipline isn't the absence of freedom. It's maturity to choose which freedom you want. The freedom to do anything at any moment, or the freedom to become someone capable of building something that lasts. Because the things that last, peace, health, presence, clarity, all require rhythm, constancy, care, and all of that is discipline. A living, conscious, human discipline that doesn't come to trap you. It comes to remind you that you can do more than you think, that you can be master of your steps, and that this internal government is the beginning of all freedom worth having. The fifth lesson returns you to your body. Returning to the body is returning home. You live inside a body, but you act as if it were a detail, a utensil, some clothing you change when the world demands a new disguise. You ask it to endure everything. Sleepless nights, hours on end in front of screens, swallowing words, sustaining smiles, carrying frustrations, silencing old pains you don't even remember where they came from. And when it starts to fail, you get irritated as if it had betrayed you. But the body doesn't fail. It just responds. It responds to every time you treated it like a machine and not like a shelter. To every time you fell silent and made it speak for you in the form of symptoms, absences, disconnections. What you call exhaustion might be longing. The body misses you. You present, you hold, you inside. The world demands that you function, not that you feel. And you learned to meet this demand, learned to complete tasks even without energy, to respond to messages even without desire, to show up where you don't want to be, to deliver more than you have, to exceed limits, to be someone reliable. But who is reliable to themselves when they abandon themselves like this? Who is worthy of admiration when they ignore their own exhaustion as if it were weakness? You're hurting yourself in the name of an efficiency that no one will return to you. And the body is the first to perceive this. It's not in a hurry, but it has memory. It stores what you despise. It accumulates the emotions you bury and transforms everything into language. Pains that repeat, digestion that doesn't flow, sleep that doesn't repair, addictions that numb. It's easy to lose touch with your own nature when you live for the outside. The body starts to seem like a burden, an obstacle, a part of you that needs to be adjusted, molded, silenced. But Stoicism, when not distorted by an ideal that's too cold and rational, teaches us that the body is an essential part of the soul. There's no virtue that sustains itself in a being who barely listens to what they feel. There's no real wisdom in someone who distances themselves from their own sensitive root. The Stoics didn't despise the body. They recognized it as a field of practice, as a starting point for self-control and true mastery. Because it's easy to seem balanced when you ignore what you feel. It's hard to sustain presence while the body trembles, while the heart races, while breathing shortens, and still remain lucid, calm, whole. You want to transform your year? Return to the body. Return like someone returning home after years of exile, without shame, without demands, without rush. Reconnect with your body like visiting an old friend. Touch your own arms with respect. Look at your skin without disgust. Understand that everything you feel, from hunger to the desire to disappear, is legitimate. The body doesn't want applause. It wants care. It doesn't want aesthetics. It wants space. It wants listening without demands. It wants to be recognized as a source of truth. Because it is. The body never lied to you. It was you who learned not to believe it. You were taught to flee, to distrust pleasure, to feel guilty for slowness, to value productivity and despise rest, to ignore touch, smell, taste. As if all of this were detail and not sustenance, you became absent inside your own flesh. And that has a price. When you don't inhabit the body, you inhabit the void. And when you inhabit the void, you try to fill it with too much food, with too much noise, with too many distractions. But what the body asks for isn't excess, it's presence, it's silence, so it can finally tell you everything you pretended not to see. And it tells you, not in words, but in symptoms, in sensitivities, in absences of pleasure, in breaks in rhythm. Reconnection begins in the gesture, in how you get out of bed, in the time you take to brush your teeth, in the way you hold your fork, in the shower you take rushing, in the clothes you put on without noticing, in the hug you offer mechanically. All of these are portals, bridges to return. Life happens there in the awakened gesture, and when you start to wake up to your own movements, you also start to recover parts of yourself that got lost in the rush. Returning to the body is an act of intimate revolution. It's not vanity, it's return. It's returning to the only place where life actually happens. The now isn't an idea, it's a sensation. It's what you perceive when you turn off the mental noise and feel your feet on the ground, the weight of your head, the temperature of your hands, the vibration in your chest. You're not in your thoughts, you're here, in this instant, in this form, in this contour, and that's enough. The sixth lesson is about reaction. You don't need to react to everything. Silence is also action. Not everything that reaches you deserves a response. Not every provocation needs to be fought. Not every attack requires defense. But we live in a time that teaches the opposite, a time when silence is seen as weakness, retreat as defeat. And not reacting seems synonymous with submission. That's why you feel you need to explain yourself all the time. to justify yourself even when you're right, to show your version, rebut criticisms, prove your truth, as if the value of who you are depended on the approval or understanding of those who aren't even willing to listen. But the truth is that many times the highest act of strength is not reacting, not out of fear, but out of lucidity. Because there are noises that aren't worth your energy, there are confrontations that are emotional traps, and there are people who don't want to converse, they want to win. The Stoics knew this. For them, true freedom isn't in saying everything you think, but in choosing what deserves to be said. They practice containment, not as repression, but as a form of self-control. Because they knew that by reacting impulsively, you hand your peace to another person. You allow someone external to dictate the tone of your day. You allow a malicious comment to throw you off your axis. You allow a minor injustice to drag you into a state of anger that lasts hours, sometimes days. And the price of this isn't small. You lose energy, focus, joy. You lose time with something that often wasn't even yours. It just crossed through you, but you decided to carry it. Reacting to everything is a disguised form of insecurity. It's as if you needed to constantly reaffirm who you are, as if every disagreement were a threat to your identity. But a solid identity doesn't need to defend itself all the time. It breathes. It allows things to pass without entering. It understands that others have the right to think differently, to be wrong, to not understand. And still, that doesn't change who you are. When you realize this, silence transforms. It stops being absence and becomes presence, a firm presence that doesn't shout but affirms, that doesn't attack but maintains, that doesn't need a stage because it already has clarity of its own voice. You don't need to respond to everything, don't need to return in the same coin, don't need to correct every misinterpretation or prove every truth of yours. Because in time, silence reveals what the urgency of confrontation tries to erase. And most of the time, what really bothers you in another's words isn't the words themselves. It's how much you still need to be seen with justice. But justice won't always come. There won't always be recognition. There won't always be a return. And that doesn't need to be a tragedy. It can just be part of the path of maturing. Part of learning to give yourself what you expected so much from outside. Validation, listening, understanding. Silence, when chosen with consciousness, is sacred territory. It gives you time to observe what's real. It prevents you from regretting words spoken in anger. It protects you from the wear of useless discussions. And above all, it returns the power of choice to you. Because reacting automatically is being a puppet. It's being at mercy. But when you breathe before responding, when you wait before judging, when you observe before acting, you become the author of your presence. You stop being someone who merely reacts to the world and become someone who creates space for what matters. This doesn't mean falling silent before what wounds you, doesn't mean accepting abuse, swallowing injustices, or living in passivity. Silence isn't submission. It's strategy. It's discernment. It's knowing the right time to speak and the wiser time not to spend your voice. Because there are fights you choose and others that just drain your light. There are debates that elevate you and others that poison you, and knowing this difference is emotional maturity. It's not letting yourself be fooled by the impulse to be right when what you really need is to maintain your peace. Starting 2026 with more strength doesn't mean speaking louder. It means listening better. It means hearing what really needs to be said and letting the rest go without lodging. It means understanding that your peace is worth more than any quick response, that your lucidity is worth more than any wounded pride, and that in the end, what remains is what was cultivated in silence. The seventh lesson addresses a hidden exhaustion. Not all tiredness is physical. Sometimes it's existential. You can sleep 8 hours and still wake up exhausted. You can take a vacation and return with a heavier soul than before. You can reduce tasks, delegate functions, reorganize your schedule, and still continue feeling that something is always weighing on your chest, as if every step required more than you can give. This tiredness isn't muscular. It doesn't resolve with coffee or rest, because it's not of the body, it's of the soul. It's the type of tiredness that doesn't come from what you do, but from what you stopped living. It's born when your actions no longer converse with your values, when you're present in what you do, but absent from yourself, when you meet all the goals, but none of them moves you anymore. Modern life has normalized this exhaustion. Productivity became a medal. The rush became identity. The accumulation of tasks became synonymous with importance. But the body feels, and when it feels, it warns. First with small alerts, difficulty concentrating, an impatience that wasn't common, a constant desire to distract yourself. Then with deeper signs, apathy, loss of meaning, chronic discouragement. You feel you're functioning but not living, operating in automatic mode, without pleasure, without presence, without brightness in your eyes. And the most dangerous thing is that you get used to it. You start thinking it's normal to always be tired. You start laughing, saying, "I can't take it anymore," as someone who already accepts that life is just this. But it isn't. It shouldn't be. The human being wasn't made to operate like a gear. There's a profound difference between effort and wear. Effort builds, even though it tires. Wear consumes, even though you keep smiling. And what defines this difference isn't the quantity of tasks, it's their meaning. When you feel that what you do has value, has purpose, has coherence with who you are, tiredness comes accompanied by satisfaction. But when you work, converse, produce, relate, without feeling that it resonates with your inner self, the tiredness that settles is existential. It's the tiredness of being alive without feeling like you're living. The Stoics recognized the value of action, but never placed it above reflection. They knew it's not much doing that brings wisdom. It's doing well, acting with intention, acting with presence, acting with alignment between what you think, what you feel, and what you accomplish. Without this, life becomes an arrangement of obligations, a theater of survival, where everything works on the outside but deteriorates on the inside. And you feel it, you know it. You perceive that something is wrong when you need constant distraction to endure the days, when you start fantasizing about escape, when you find yourself wishing something would change, but without knowing exactly what. Maybe what needs to change isn't what you do, but why. Not the work, but the intention behind it. Not the routine, but the absence of meaning it carries. Not the number of tasks, but the way you give yourself to them. Or don't. Because meaning can't be bought, outsourced, or scheduled. It needs to be cultivated. And this cultivation begins with simple and difficult questions. Why am I doing this? For whom? What am I postponing in the name of this rush? What am I losing in the name of a performance I'm not even sure represents me anymore? There's a type of silence you need to face, a silence that can't be filled with series or messages or more tasks. It's the silence where answers dwell, and also discomforts, where the echo of a forgotten truth lives. You're not tired just because you did a lot. You're tired because you feel you're too distant from yourself. You're exhausted because for too long you haven't felt real enthusiasm for anything, because your conversations lost depth, your days meaning your nights rest. But there's still time. The soul regenerates when you start truly listening to yourself, when you allow pauses to become sacred again, when you understand that resting isn't a luxury, it's a responsibility, when you accept that productivity without meaning is just another way of hurting yourself efficiently. And this listening doesn't require you to drop everything. It just requires you to begin. Begin asking yourself honestly what nourishes you. What makes you more alive? What makes you not just breathe, but exist with intention? Existential tiredness isn't overcome with willpower. It dissolves with reconnection. And reconnection requires courage to rethink priorities, to say no to what no longer represents you, to abandon the mask of someone who's always fine, to admit it's hard, but that you don't want to live like this anymore, because life doesn't need to be light all the time, but it needs to make sense. It needs to touch you somewhere. It needs to remind you that you're here for something more than checking off lists. Starting 2026 with more energy doesn't mean doing more. It means doing with more truth, with more listening, with more presence. Because where there's presence, there's meaning. And where there's meaning, tiredness becomes consequence, not condemnation. The 8th lesson confronts your rushing. Hurry is a form of fear in disguise. We live in a world where stopping became synonymous with failure, where slowness is viewed with suspicion, as if someone who moves slowly were at a disadvantage, as if thinking calmly were wasting time, as if feeling deeply were a luxury. Hurry has installed itself as a lifestyle. And the most dangerous thing is that it doesn't present itself as a problem, but as competence. You learn to take pride in being efficient, fast, multitasking. You learn to value yourself by how much you can do in little time. And so gradually, you forget to ask why you're doing all of this, where you're going, what you're leaving behind. Life becomes a list, not a journey, a performance, not an experience. But the truth is that behind the hurry lives fear. Not the explicit fear that paralyzes, but a fear camouflaged as productivity, a well-dressed fear, disguised as ambition, focus, movement, fear of facing silence, fear of feeling what hasn't yet been resolved, fear of admitting there are pains that aren't cured with speed, that there are answers that aren't born in urgency, so you accelerate, you wake up running, respond to messages running, eat fast, think by impulse, sleep poorly, and call all of this routine. But the honest name would be escape, a collective, rewarded, admired escape, where the more you run, the more you seem to be living, even though inside you're just surviving. The Stoics saw time as sacred. They knew that living well isn't living long. It's living with intention, that speed isn't virtue when it runs over the soul, that those who live in too much hurry don't see, don't feel, don't digest. They just accumulate experiences like someone collecting memories that were never actually lived. Because hurry has this effect. It piles up days but steals their density. You reach the end of the week and don't remember having been whole at any moment. You passed through everything but were present in nothing. And here's the most delicate point. Many times you hide in hurry to avoid dealing with what's asking to be heard. Because it's easier to schedule meetings than to face emptiness. Easier to fill the agenda than to feel what the body has been trying to say for months. Easier to run than to stop and realize that despite everything seeming right on the outside, something in you has been screaming on the inside. But you don't hear it, because hearing requires pause. And in this world, pause frightens, because whoever stops starts to see clearly, starts to perceive the excesses, the masks, the forced adaptations. And clarity sometimes requires rupture. That's why hurry is so comfortable. It keeps you too busy to question yourself. The question isn't becoming someone slow, contemplative all the time, or renouncing action. The question is choosing the rhythm with consciousness. It's knowing that doing fast isn't always doing well, that deciding fast isn't always deciding right, that responding fast isn't always communicating truth. Life has its own time. The body has its own time. Emotions, internal processes, deep transformations, all of this doesn't obey the logic of the stopwatch. And trying to force them is like yelling at a seed to grow faster. What you get is just noise. Hurry never makes anything be born before its time. It just exhausts before the flourishing. You need to relearn the value of slowness, not of procrastination, but of presence. The difference is subtle but radical. Procrastination postpones out of fear. Presence slows down out of wisdom. Procrastination denies the moment. Presence honors it, and this presence only becomes possible when you admit you're not a machine, that you don't need to produce all the time, that you don't need to correspond to everything all the time, that you can say it's not yet time, that you can refuse imposed urgency and choose the time that respects your wholeness. Hurry is comfortable because it spares you from confronting what really matters, but it's this confrontation that transforms you. It's what returns wholeness to you, what shows you where you're lying to yourself, what reveals what no longer serves. And that doesn't appear when everything is running. It appears when you stop, when you breathe, when you listen to that discomfort you've been muffling with productivity. And there, in the interval between one task and another, dwells what you need most. Not a new objective, but a return to yourself. Starting 2026 well isn't doing more. It's doing with more time. It's doing with more soul. It's allowing life's rhythm to become gradually more compatible with your truth. And truth isn't revealed running. It offers itself to those who learn to be whole, even in silence, even slowly, even if, in the world's eyes, late. But it's never late to be in tune with what pulses inside. The ninth lesson confronts your internal narrative. What you repeat in secret becomes destiny. You might not notice, but there's a voice in you that never sleeps. It speaks when you're distracted, when no one is listening, when the day is almost ending and you mentally review everything you did or didn't do. This voice doesn't appear in your stories, doesn't enter meetings, doesn't ask permission. It infiltrates the spaces of silence, in the gaps between one task and another, and with time it creates trails. You start repeating certain phrases. I'm not good at this. This never works out for me. I don't think it will work. I don't know if I deserve it. It seems innocent, seems like just a mental vent, but these words, even silent, are seeds. And seeds don't ask if you wanted to plant them, they just grow. What you repeat in secret builds the invisible frame of your destiny. You can be fighting on the outside with strength, discipline, goals, strategies, but if inside there's a constant repetition of doubt, fear, devaluation, that external strength becomes fragile, because the body acts according to what the mind believes. And the mind believes what it hears frequently. You are what you hear from yourself when you're in silence. And if that internal sound is of criticism, scarcity, or distrust, then everything you touch carries a bit of that echo. You can achieve, but not enjoy. You can advance, but sabotage yourself. You can love, but distrust. Because your destiny isn't being molded only by your decisions. It's being drawn by the ideas you cultivate without realizing. The Stoics called this the hegemonikon, the rational center of the soul, the most intimate part of being, where judgment is formed. It's there that before even the gesture, the value of things is decided. And you may not have control over the external world, but you'll always have power over what you let this center absorb. If you don't watch what you repeat to yourself, the world starts repeating for you. And nothing is more dangerous than a destiny built from narratives you never consciously chose. That's why inner vigilance is a practice, not a state. You need to observe yourself like someone caring for an old house, paying attention to every crack that appears, because every small fissure can become a rupture if ignored for too long. But it's not about eliminating bad thoughts. That's impossible. The mind thinks. That's its nature. It's about noticing what repeats without resistance, what settles as truth without you having authorized it. You can think I'm a failure on a bad day. That's human. But if you think that every day without noticing, that phrase becomes identity. And identity shapes your decisions. And your decisions draw your life. That's why what you repeat in secret needs to be investigated, needs to be brought to light, because the unconscious, when not looked at, commands. And you keep thinking you're in control, when actually you're just responding to a trail that's been being carved for years inside you. Maybe you're carrying beliefs that aren't yours, phrases you heard in childhood and never questioned, words spoken in moments of pain that stayed trapped in the body like an invisible tattoo. And now, even as an adult, even conscious, you still move trying to prove the opposite of those phrases. But every time you try to prove, you confirm that you still believe them. The way out isn't trying to defeat these voices. It's conversing with them. It's asking, where did you come from? Why are you still here? What are you trying to protect me from feeling? Because even self-sabotaging thoughts have a logic. They arose to protect you, to keep you in known territory. But today, what protects you traps you, and what traps you defines your steps. You don't need to shout positive mantras every day, or force yourself to think beautifully all the time. That would just be emotional makeup. What you need is to create awareness, to listen with attention, to notice when something starts to repeat, to have the courage to substitute, not by denial, but by choice, consciously choosing what you want to nurture, what you want to strengthen. And this starts with small changes. A word you stop using to talk about yourself. A thought you interrupt before it takes root. A phrase you substitute with another that, though still seeming strange, already points toward the kind of life you want to build. You can't control everything that happens outside, but you can change the tone of the voice that accompanies you inside. And this change is silent. No one will applaud. No one will notice immediately, but gradually you feel it. Feel that you're less heavy, that you're sabotaging yourself less, that you're allowing yourself more, that for the first time in a long time, you're becoming an accomplice of yourself, no longer an internal enemy. And this alliance changes everything. Because when your mind starts repeating, even timidly, phrases like this strengthens me. I can handle it. This is part of the path. I deserve peace. Something inside you reorganizes. And destiny, which before was a reflection of fear, starts to be fruit of choice. The 10th lesson is about boundaries. What you tolerate in silence molds you in secret. There's a type of wear that isn't noticed immediately. It doesn't come with screaming or dramatic breaks. It comes as a silent accumulation, like the repetition of an uncomfortable gesture you chose not to question. It comes with that word said in disguised tone. That look that crosses through you without welcome. That invitation loaded with demand, disguised as affection. And you tolerate it. Not because you don't feel, but because you believe it's nobler to be patient than to impose yourself. You think you're choosing peace, but you don't realize you're just feeding the fear of disappointing. And in this game, you become someone who smiles with the mouth and screams with the body, someone who remains present in places where your soul left long ago. You convince yourself it's better to let it go, that it's not worth the wear, that maybe you're exaggerating. And then you retreat, adjust, swallow. You start negotiating your presence to keep fragile relationships standing. You start giving away parts of yourself in the name of a bond that asks for your silence. And when you realize you're living as a guest of your own existence, behaving with politeness where you should be whole, walking with caution where you needed to step with firmness, and all of this with the best intentions, preserving the other, avoiding friction, protecting stability. But there's no stability worth the price of your own mutilation. The Stoics knew that self-control is needed, but never self-abandonment. That the world can be hard, but the greater hardness is bowing before what sabotages your essence. They didn't ask for passivity before disrespect. They asked for clarity before what's acceptable. And the clarity that's missing today is born from the distortion we made of maturity. You learned that growing up is knowing how to endure, when maybe growing up is knowing up to where, no more. Because enduring everything isn't strength, it's fatigue, it's exhaustion from so much repressing your own will, from so much ignoring the signs of exhaustion the body sends, from so much silencing what still pulses in you but can no longer be seen. You think you're being generous, but you're just slowly erasing yourself. becoming predictable in tolerance, available in renunciation, understanding to the point of disappearing. And there's something deeply unfair in this process. The more you give in, the more they expect you to keep giving in. The more you tolerate, the less they perceive how much it costs you. Because no one hears the silence of someone who consents, they just take advantage of it. The world isn't cruel by nature, but it tests the spaces, and if you never say where it ends, they'll step on you thinking they're walking on common ground. There comes a time when the pain of silence becomes greater than the fear of conflict. A time when you can no longer pretend that what hurts is irrelevant. And then something inside you cries out for truth, and that truth doesn't shout. It just rises with dignity. It says firmly, "From here no more." It doesn't come as an attack, but as sacred defense. Because setting limits is saying yes to your sanity, to your self-esteem, to your emotional integrity. It's remembering that you also matter, that your discomfort also has a voice, that your presence shouldn't be sustained at the expense of concessions that dilute your identity. When you choose to always fall silent when something hurts you, you're not avoiding an external conflict. You're initiating an internal war because your body feels, your mind records, your soul perceives every time you turn your back on yourself. And these accumulated small betrayals transform into symptoms: insomnia, anxiety, repressed anger, apathy, demotivation. Not because you're weak, but because no one can bear to live in constant contradiction between what they feel and what they show. Healing begins when you decide not to lie to yourself anymore, when you recognize that keeping the other comfortable at the expense of your own discomfort isn't empathy, it's emotional slavery. When you understand that love, respect, and presence are only worth it if you can be whole. Whole isn't intransigent, it isn't rigid, it isn't aggressive. Whole is just someone who refuses to exist by halves, who learned that your light wasn't made to fit in spaces that require darkness to accept company, who understood that you don't need to dilute yourself to be loved or bow to be heard. You don't need to explode, don't need to break with everything, but you need to stop building with what hurts you, need to stop calling peace this truce where only you lower your head. Need, with courage and tenderness, to rebuild your presence where it was used as convenience. This is possible, but it starts with a gesture, hearing the discomfort, naming what hurts, saying in a firm voice, even if trembling, that you're no longer available for relationships that only exist when you disappear. From the moment you refuse the silence that annuls you, something in you is reborn. Something that was asleep awakens. Your voice gains body, your posture changes, and the world, even if it doesn't perceive immediately, starts to understand. Here lives someone who respects themselves, someone who learned, perhaps with pain, that what you tolerate builds the invisible walls of your internal house, and that no house should be built with the material of omission. The 11th and final lesson transforms suffering. Not everything that hurts is injustice. Sometimes it's a midwife. There's a moment when you stop asking why me and start asking what still needs to be born in me. Not always does this turn happen consciously. Sometimes it's forced by loss, by falling, by the sudden interruption of a plan that seemed certain. Other times, it's slow, like the maturation of a wound that, tired of festering, starts asking for meaning. You look back and realize the deepest pains didn't destroy you. They molded you. That, what dismantled you later, organized you inside. And that not all pain came to punish you. Some came to birth versions you would never have accessed in comfort. Stoic philosophy didn't reject suffering, it didn't idolize it either, but it also didn't avoid it as something shameful. On the contrary, it treated it as a function of nature, like cold, rain, time, something you don't control, but that when understood can become a path of transformation. And there's something incredibly powerful in this. Because we live in a culture that teaches fleeing from pain at any cost, that venerates joy as the thermometer of a successful life. But pain, when listened to with integrity, has a pedagogical power that no empty joy can offer. Pain shows where there's still attachment, illusion, rigidity, shows where there's still not enough self-love, where you still expect too much from others, where you still believe that control is security. Of course, there are pains that are fruits of injustice. There are pains that shouldn't happen, violence, neglect, trauma, but there are others that are part of the process of being born again, pains that aren't punishment but passage. And when you start perceiving them this way, something changes. You stop resisting so much, stop victimizing yourself, stop waiting for life to apologize for having demanded from you a little more than you were ready to give. And you start asking, if this is hurting, what in me is being torn away? And could it be that this something didn't really need to leave? You surprise yourself with your own strength when you have no other choice but to use it. You discover wisdom that was asleep. You gain clarity you wouldn't have in any other scenario, and life silently reorganizes you. It tears away what no longer sustains, moves what was stagnant, breaks bonds that were already withered, and yes, it hurts deeply. But it hurts like childbirth hurts, not because it's destroying something, but because it's bringing something to light. The Stoics had a word for this, amor fati, love of fate. Not resigned acceptance, but profound acceptance of what happens as an inseparable part of existence. They didn't believe everything happened for a reason. That's a simplistic reading. They believed everything that happens can be used as an opportunity for cultivating virtue, and that changes everything, because it takes you out of the victim position and places you as agent. You don't control the arrival of pain, but you control what it finds in you. If it finds revolt, it grows. If it finds openness, it works. It hurts, but it works. Sometimes what you need isn't consolation, but comprehension. Not sweet words, but true words. Not everything that breaks you is killing you. In many cases, it's just dismantling what you wouldn't have the courage to let go of on your own. It's revealing the fragility of an idea you insisted on maintaining. It's cleaning the rubble of an old identity. It's opening a new space where before there was only repetition. And as strange as it seems, there comes a time when you're grateful it hurt. Not in the romantic sense, not in the masochistic sense, but in the most intimate sense, because it was there that you learned to return home, that you discovered you can survive even without what you thought was essential, that you found layers of your soul that had never seen the sun, that you finally began to walk on your own. Pain, when welcomed, delivers you back to yourself. And that return is what you were seeking, even without knowing. Because what you most desire, deep down, isn't a life without pain. It's a life with meaning, and meaning can't be bought, inherited, or taught. Meaning is revealed, often in the dark. Thank you for staying with me until the end. I sincerely hope this message has been useful. I want to congratulate you for making it this far and completing the video. It means you want to improve as a person. If you enjoyed this video, leave your comment. If you don't know what to comment, comment gratitude. That way, I'll know you watched until the end. If you're not yet subscribed to the channel, what are you waiting for? Subscribe now and join us. Stoicism is full of teachings like this that are applicable to our daily lives. Therefore, I encourage you to continue learning about this philosophy. See you next time.